Have you ever looked at two countries that have, on paper, pretty similar systems? Maybe they're both democracies, both have presidents, but the way politics actually feels is just night and day? In one place, you've got tons of protests and everyone votes, but in the other, it's like nobody cares. The rules look the same, but the reality is totally different. So, what's going on here?
Well, the answer lies in this kind of invisible ingredient, a really powerful concept that political scientists call political culture. It isn't about the formal rules, it's something way deeper. As the scholar Eric Rowe put it, it's the cultural part of a nation that gives color to everything else, the economy, society, and of course, its politics.
Okay, so what is this invisible force, really? How do we actually wrap our heads around this idea of color and turn it into something we can analyze and, understand?
The best way to think about it is like this. It's the collective political personality of a society. It's all the shared assumptions and attitudes people have about how politics is supposed to work, what their role is, and what they should expect from their government. It's kind of like the political air you'd breathe without even noticing it.
And this is absolutely crucial. We're not talking about the written stuff, like constitutions or laws. We're talking about the subjective world of values, emotions, and beliefs that holds all those formal rules up. It's the massive difference between what's written down on paper and what people actually feel, believe, and do in the real world.
So, how in the world do you describe something so, invisible? Luckily for us, some really sharp thinkers came along and gave us the language we need to pin this thing down.
A couple of the pioneers in this were Gabriel, Almond, and Sidney Verba. They talked about it as the pattern of orientations people have, or the whole system of beliefs and values. Basically, they said that this system creates the entire context. It sets the stage, so to speak, on which all political action happens.
But it was another scholar, Lucian Pye, who just nailed it with one of the most powerful definitions out there. He said it's the set of attitudes and beliefs that give order and meaning to the whole political process. Without this shared culture, politics would just be a bunch of random, chaotic events.
And Pye gave us this brilliant metaphor for it. He called it an operational code, or a public handbook. Just think about that for a second. It's like this unwritten rule book that everyone in a society just kind of has. It guides how they act in politics and helps them make sense of what everyone else is doing.
Okay, so if it's a handbook, what's actually written inside? To really get this operational code, we got to break it down into its core parts. What are the actual building blocks that make up a country's political culture?
Well, it all starts with us, with individuals. We relate to politics in three basic ways. First, there's the cognitive part. That's what you know, or what you think you know about the system. Then there's the affective part. That's how you feel about it. Are you proud? Angry? Do you just not care? And finally, the evaluative part. That's the judgments you make based on your own values.
And we take that whole mix of knowing, feeling, and judging, and we apply it to four big areas. First, our sense of national identity. How proud we are of our country. Second, how we see our fellow citizens. Do we trust them? Third, what we think about what the government actually does, the outputs, like schools and roads. And finally, how we feel about the decision-making process itself, like, are elections fair?
So here's where it gets really interesting. When you start combining all these building blocks in different ways, you end up with some very distinct types of political cultures. Almond and Verba laid out three main ideal types that really help us categorize different societies.
First up, at the most basic level, you have what's called a parochial culture. In these societies, people really don't have much awareness of a central government. Politics is super local. It's about the village, the family, the clan. The national system just feels a million miles away.
Now, take a step up from that, and you get this subject culture. Here, people are definitely aware of the government's power. They get that they have to obey laws and pay taxes, but they relate to it passively, like subjects. They expect things from the government, but they don't really see themselves as having any say in what it does.
And finally, we get to the participant culture. This is a whole different ballgame. Here, citizens don't just care about what the government produces, the outputs, they care about the inputs too. They believe they can, and that they should, be involved in shaping policy. They see themselves as active players.
And all of this leads to the big idea that Almond and Verba proposed, the civic culture. What's so brilliant about this is they argued that the most stable democracy isn't 100% participatory. That could just be chaos, right? Instead, it's a healthy blend of all three. You need active participants, sure, but you also need people to be law-abiding subjects to keep things orderly. It's that balance that makes the whole thing work.
Okay, so these are great ideal types, but how do they actually map onto the real world? Well, another scholar, S.E. Feiner, built on these ideas to create a handy framework for classifying political systems based on one really important thing: stability.
Feiner's big idea was that a government's stability really just boils down to two key things in its political culture. First, there's legitimacy. Do people actually accept the system's right to rule? And second, there's participation. How actively involved is the public in the whole process?
And using just those two factors, he created a whole spectrum. At the most stable end, you have mature political cultures, like in the UK or the US, where there's high legitimacy and a lot of agreement. A step down, you have developed cultures, where things are a little less solid. Then you get to low political cultures, which are often unstable. And finally, you have minimal cultures, where there's basically no organized public opinion at all. Think pre-revolutionary France.
And that brings us all the way back to that idea of the public handbook. You see, understanding political culture gives us this incredible new lens to see the invisible forces that are shaping our own world. It really makes you stop and ask yourself, what are the unwritten rules and shared attitudes that are running the show right here, right now? What does your operational code actually say?